So now we're recording. Okay, so continuing on our theme of getting to know each other, I did send around a welcome survey, and I think a good number of you took it. If you haven't taken it yet, please do. The link to that is on Canvas. But I'm just gonna kind of flash up a few of the results from that. Actually, I'm not yeah, so this is where we're all from in terms of hometowns. I know that some of us consider multiple things to be our hometown, so this is what you gave me. So good spread of the U.S. and then got the African continent represented as well, which some of you may or may not know. I spent the first half of last year, actually, when I was giving this class last year, I was giving this class from Rwanda. I spent 5 months there with my family, which was really wonderful. So, and I've done quite a bit of work in Ghana too. So West Africa, East Africa, both near and dear to my heart. So yeah, and then we've got, again, good kind of all the US time zones covered from what I can tell. So good coverage there too. Where we are now, mostly spread over the Denver Metro, but it looks like some folks also are spending time. I know that we have a student who I'm not sure if they're here today, joining from California. Again, for the most part, we're going to be here local, spread across the Denver Metro area. Some of us commuting, some of us nice and close by. I live in Louisville. So a little bit of a commute for me. All right, in terms of topics that you listed as interests, so actually, climate change has been top of my list for the last few years. It's still quite high, but lots of folks interested in risk assessment, air and water pollution, occupational health and safety, housing in the built environment. So lots of different interests. I think we're going to touch on all of these again. Policy cuts across certainly all of these topics. So we will hopefully find things that fall within your area of interest, regardless of sort of what that is. In terms of what you're coming into the class with, in terms of skills related to policy, lots of people have experience doing literature reviews, which is important for policy making for sure. We need to know like what the evidence is that's out there, and conducting interviews. So those are both be key components of our policy group projects that you all will be doing. So great that many of you have experience in that area. Also, if you don't, this is going to be a great way to build those skills. Yeah, for some of the things like public testimony, I actually would love to see, like 100% of you at the end of this class are going to have some experience in that area. Again, I hope that doesn't freak you out. We're going to give you lots of support. It's a great skill to be using as members of a society, as well as in your professional roles. And so I think that's something that hopefully will be great areas for all of you to grow, and all of us to learn more about. Thank you for sharing your questions. So this is things that you hope to get out of this class. And again, I really do take these to heart. I think a lot of these are things that we are already planning to look at, but for any others, I'm definitely, we'll figure out how we make sure that by the end of the class, we've at least touched on each of these. So a lot of questions about the policy process. I'm actually going to start getting into that in just a minute. How is the sausage actually made, right? And then how can we actually read and understand a policy? How can I, or how can people in particular communities, such as people in disproportionately impacted communities, get involved in the policy process? Again, that is going to be a key focus of what we're doing, and understanding those dynamics, those relationships, those power structures, all of that. How can we promote, for example, worker safety? What's the difference between a law and a policy? Does anybody know that? Joey, you're nodding. I'm gonna call on you.
Yeah, I just looked that up.
Great.
A law is something that is place throughout the US. A policy is something that is more, I guess, reality of being here in Colorado. We have different policies, but there are policies throughout the US as well.
Yeah, I think I might phrase that a little bit differently than the internet. So you can decide who to believe. I would say that law is a subset of policy. So policy is really broad. Policy can be Colorado Department or School of Public Health has a policy that, right, you have to wear your badge when you're on campus, right? That is not a law, right? That is not something that has been passed by a legislative body. It is a policy for this particular environment, this particular area. And so we can have policies, for example, at the local level. So the city of Louisville makes policy. It has ordinances, statutes, all of these words that mean here's what's allowed in Louisville, right? Those are different, those are policies. They aren't laws. Laws are at the state level and at the federal level. And those laws are passed by the legislative branch of government, right? So remind folks that we've got in the US 3 branches of government. We have the legislature, so Congress, the judicial, the courts, and the executive branch. So at the federal level, that's the president. At the state level, that's the governor, for example, right? So those laws are a subset of sort of this broad umbrella of policy. And so we're going to talk about, we're going to talk a lot about laws. We're going to talk a lot about policies at these various other levels as well. And when we talk about sort of making difference, again, we're going to look at this sort of policy watch for bills that are trying to become laws in Colorado. But we're also, for example, going to have student teams that are working on policies in the city of Louisville, to give a concrete example.
I have a question for
yeah.
that. So the way I think about it, and I don't know if I'm right on this, is a law something that if you don't follow, you can be punished for, and a policy is heavily encouraged that you follow, but nobody can necessarily like have punitive action if they don't do it?
I don't think that's right. You can be followed, or I mean, you can be, for example, fired for not following your company's policies. And that is certainly a major punishment, right? So it is within the government, right? There are sanctions and consequences, and not all, like that sort of part of the law is if you don't do this, what happens, right? And not all laws, have a punishment attached to them. So yeah, I'm not sure how helpful that framing is, but yeah, I think that again, yeah, I'd be curious actually. So continue your Googling. Again, be skeptical. What I'm telling you might not be right. So we're gonna think about industry, how it can work and comply with regulations. We're gonna think about how to use. So I love this question. I actually don't. I think it's a great question. It is troubling to me as well. How can we use policy to tackle big problems in a polarized country? And I think that is a huge question for us all to be grappling with, is where can we make change when we do have the reality of divided government and also a divided, we have different facts for different folks, right? How do we make progress towards reducing environmental exposures, making communities healthier when we seem so divided? I would say that, just to say one quick thing on that, again, I think working at the local level is one pathway. So one of the projects that I am involved in is a community engagement project around climate change that Kathy James and I co-lead. And for that project, we're engaging with communities. So I lead with Cerise Hunt, the sort of engagement we're doing with West Denver communities. And then Kathy James and Lisa Secuto are leading our engagement with the San Luis Valley, so rural communities in Southwest Colorado. And, I think I've learned a ton about this from Kathy. Her area is one that really exemplifies that polarization, that there are folks that, for example, are perfectly happy to talk about climate change and, its causes and all of that, and folks that really don't want to have that conversation, but are all in completely there to talk about drought and how it's affecting the community and what the steps are that can be taken to address that. And so I think, a lot of this answer to me is finding those core values and the things that do cut across, that folks can, and I think there is a lot of that at the local level, that there are things that people can get on board with. And so it's a challenge for sure. It's definitely a huge obstacle to enacting the big structural changes that I think many of us believe are needed, to really dismantle a lot of the systems that are making us so exceptionally unhealthy as a society. So, not going to go full like everything is great, but I think there is a lot that can be done at that local level. And that might, build towards things that can happen at the federal level when we build those coalitions and really, start to identify the shared interests that do exist across communities. We're going to have a lecture in a couple of weeks about OSHA, and I think this is a great question for Mike Van Dyke to ask about why those exposure standards haven't been updated. I loved the fun facts that you all shared. So again, if you haven't already taken the survey, please do that. This is just a preview. Next week, we're going to do an icebreaker where I'm actually going to use these, but these are visual depictions of some of the fun things that you all shared about yourselves. Thank you also for those who shared some of the challenges that you might be facing or requests that you have for me in terms of how I can help you be successful in class and support you, whether that's, full-time work that you're doing or personal stuff that you've got going on. I just, want to kind of put out there that for me, I am completely, first of all, 100% glad that you all are here. Many of you also expressed that you're excited to take this class. So again, if it hasn't come across, I am very excited to be teaching this class this semester. I'm always excited, but this year is a little bit special, I think, in terms of, again, the kinds of things that I think we're going to be able to do together. And so I'm glad that all of you are here, and I know that sometimes being here is a challenge, and the more that you're willing to share, not that you have to tell me absolutely everything, right? But the things that are relevant to helping me understand where you're coming from and how to support you in your learning journey and where you need flexibility. This is an environment that's for you. You don't owe me anything. And so I think the more that, again, that I hope you're willing to let me know about what I can do and how we can, develop a relationship in a classroom community that's focused on supporting all of us. So to that end, I'm going to put up some class norms here. I would love any input on these. So, just encouraging folks to speak from your own experience using these I statements, right? We are the experts in our own lives and lived experiences. We are not the experts in our friends and neighbors' experiences. And so having that humility of being able to talk with confidence about what we've been through, and then listening, being curious, open, respectful. And I think, again, that in that polarized world, I mean, I think these are some of the things that we all need to be working on, right? And also expecting other people to treat us with this way as well, right? So it shouldn't be a one-way street, but that we are trying to create environments where we're open to perspectives that differ, and we're here to listen deeply, ask questions, and learn. We know that sometimes we are going to mess up, that we're going to say something that really lands for other folks that are coming from a different perspective, in a way that that might cause harm. And being able to hear that, right? So having a space, and I definitely encourage folks in whatever way feels possible, or comfortable to you, whether that's in the moment, just putting a flag up and saying, hold on, can we address this? Like, so that sort of, whoa, let's take a minute, right? And then being willing to kind of listen to, oh man, I use this turn of phrase that I had no idea, right? So it's not that, we can have no intention of doing harm, but still be willing to hear how something that we've done caused hurt, and how we can do better. Taking space and making space. So this is something I think as an educator that is a constant journey of mine, is trying to be open to different ways that people participate in class, right? Whether that's you're here and you're listening, and then maybe you've got some really deep thoughts afterwards. So I encourage you, if you're one of those people that really isn't going to speak up a lot in class, send me a little note. I'll show you, we're going to use Slack for class. So I'm hoping that's a way for folks to kind of engage. Use the chat when we're on Zoom. If there are ways that you can kind of engage in the material and kind of share that with me, the ways that you're kind of processing this. And also, encouraging you to step outside your comfort zone. So, if you're not somebody who typically speaks up, try and do that a couple times, right, this semester. And if you are the first person to raise your hand every time I ask for questions, like, wait a tick, and let other folks speak up too. So anything that folks like to add, or other norms, any requests that you have for our community that we're building here? Alrighty, well, again, I welcome any thoughts that you have, that you want to send, any notes that you want to send me offline as well. Okay, a couple of other things, and this, I think I'm just going to kind of put these on here for things to think about. We're talking about policies. I am not going to make a hard and fast policy around these things, but just encouraging folks to be thoughtful about, it is helpful for me to be able to see folks' faces when you're in a space where that's comfortable for you to be on camera. So I'm not just talking to blank screens. So thanks. Also totally understand you're not feeling well. You've got other things going on and that's not possible. So I'm understanding of that, but when, I guess the request is, when that feels like something you're comfortable with, I would love to be able to see your faces when we're remote like this. When we're in class, again, I think just being mindful about how we're using our laptops, for example, be distracting for others if they're looking over and seeing you, like, on TikTok. So, I understand, like, a lot of people like to take notes on their computer, or, I'm telling you something and you're, Googling and getting more information about it, right? But just being thoughtful about that. And I know that I have, one of my sort of New Year's resolution journeys that I'm on is trying to create more spaces without distractions. So actually shutting my email for good portions of the day and turning my phone notifications off. So, if there are, ways to have, for this classroom space to be a space where you can minimize your distractions and be present, that's great. And then, yeah, I already kind of covered this, like, I think letting me know, like, what are some ways that you would like to participate and like to get credit for the class for participating. that if those are looking different than, you know, just being somebody who speaks up a lot. I also, again, love class discussion. So thoughts or feedback on these questions? In terms of communication, so the ways to get in touch with me, email is very good. Canvas, I think if you send me an email through Canvas, it will go, like a message through Canvas, I think it goes to my email. I don't always check that inbox on Canvas. So if you send me something on Canvas and you haven't gotten a response, please kick it over to my email. And then we're going to use Slack. And so I know that actually several of you, I sent out the invitation to everyone who was on my list as of, I think, yesterday. And so for those of you who haven't used Slack before, please reach out if you would like a tutorial. It is a great way to kind of have a little bit less formal interaction and to share things. So for example, actually I think I can pull this. Nope, not that one. This one. This is our classroom Slack space. And so, for example, can use joining here. For example, we have a Policy Watch channel. We're going to start talking about this in just a second. And I've got links up here so we can add more, but this is a standing link to the Colorado General Assembly website, which is something that you're going to be spending a lot of time on. So it's just a nice space. Anything that's sort of official, here's a deadline, here's a due date, that will all be on Canvas. So if Slack is not your thing, you should not be missing out on anything that is like, this is a requirement of the class, and please complete this assignment. That will all be on Canvas, but it's sort of a nice way to engage in conversation. And I'm pretty responsive if you want to send me direct messages through Slack as well. Great. Okay, I'm going to be really brief about this. I think I'm actually going to do more of my intro next week. So I'm Katie, and please call me Katie. Dr. Dickinson is fine, but really I'm happy with Katie. I've worked on a lot of different things. Again, I'll be sharing some of that kind of throughout the semester. I guess just a kind of yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Also, Hannah is our teaching assistant. She will not be able to be joining us in class most of the time. She's doing an internship at CDPHE, but you will see her name on communication. She's helping with Slack and Canvas and some other logistics. But please, yeah, I mean, you can copy me on any emails, and I'm doing all the grading for the class. Will be me for the most part. So I'm your main point of contact, but Hannah's helping out sort of in the background. Alrighty, so we're going to dive into our Policy Watch. So this is something that I have been doing as a part of class, as I said, for the past few years, but we're going to make it a little bit more central and actually have some assignments related to this. So how the sausage is made, I am going to share, every year I've meant to do this, to actually, you know, find the good old schoolhouse rock, how a bill becomes a law, have you all watch that as a more fun way of consuming the content that is in front of you right now. And so I'm going to walk you through this real quick. This is again the sausage making at the state level for Colorado. So a bill is conceived, and there's a whole process that comes before, you know, what we're looking at here. But at some point, a group of people have decided this is something that they want to push forward as a policy change, and they have decided to introduce, so legislators, people who are elected in the legislature, have decided to sponsor a bill and introduce it in either the House or Senate. So there's actually two ways this can happen. So there are two parts of the Colorado General Assembly, two houses, right? The House and the Senate. And so this is the picture for a bill that is introduced initially in the House. Any bill, so it just really depends who the prime sponsor of the bill is. If the person who's sponsoring the bill is in the House, and it might even have co-sponsors that are in the Senate, but they've decided that it's going to start in the House, then it does this process. It could also start in the Senate, and then it's just sort of reverses the order. But so for a bill that's introduced in the House, it has a first reading. So actually on the floor of the House, the clerk will announce the title of the bill, and then they will refer it to a committee. And so there are multiple committees that cover different topics, again, in each house there. So in the House and in the Senate, there are a number of different committees. So they'll say this goes to the Finance Committee, this goes to the Education Committee. And then the bill will go to that committee, and they'll have a hearing in that committee. The committee is comprised of, again, legislators, people in the House in this case. And it is the House leadership, so the party that has the majority gets to decide who is in each committee, and the party that is in the majority has the majority in all of its House committees. So in Colorado, Democrats are in the majority in both the House and the Senate, and our governor is a Democrat. And so Democrats have control of the Colorado government. And so that means that every committee in Colorado, in the House and the Senate, has a majority of Democrats on it. So it makes it very difficult for Republicans to pass policy, with particularly if they don't have support from Democrats. And so it's really that coalition building, right? The places where Republicans and Democrats can agree, which is where Republicans can have power. They can also have, there are some procedural things that they're able to do. We don't really have a filibuster at the state level the same way that there is one at the national level, but there are other kind of procedural steps that that the minority party can take. So we've gotten our bill. It's in it's being heard in committee. Then that committee. So this is where again, for this assignment that you're going to have, this is where public comment is taken in this process. So you will most likely be providing testimony in during a committee hearing, written or oral testimony. And then the committee deliberates. They can ask questions of the people who come in to give testimony. And then at the end of the day, they vote. And they decide whether to refer it to, and they can also propose amendments at this stage. Once it passes, and sometimes it'll go to multiple committees, sometimes like the Education Committee, and then it'll go to the Appropriations Committee, for example, if there's a budget component to it. Then it goes to second reading, which is a voice vote. So literally, again, we'll get to experience this. But it's like aye or nay, and they don't count. It's just sort of like, oh, it sounds like there's more in this category. There's also some, yeah, they kind of know how many people are in favor or opposed at this point. So this is the second reading is a voice vote. And this is now on the floor of the full House. And so public comment is not allowed at this point, but the members of the legislature can come up and speak in favor or in opposition to the bill and the debate at this point. And then if it passes on second reading, then it goes to a third reading. On third reading, there's a recorded vote. So they're actually like, there's a ticker and it's up on the wall, and they'll say, you know, everyone record your votes, and each person votes yay or nay or abstain at this point. Okay. So then if it passes in the House, then it moves to the Senate, and it goes through that same exact process in the Senate. So it's going to go to committee. It's going to do first committee, or yeah, so first reading, go to committee, come back, do second reading on the Senate floor, third reading, and then if it passes both, then it goes, if it passes the Senate, then it goes back to the House. And this is particularly you know, relevant if there were amendments. So if it passes the House and then the Senate introduces amendments, then it has to go back to the House to kind of adjudicate those changes and say, does the House accept the changes that the Senate made? Depending on if they accept or reject the changes, then it either, if the House just accepts the changes, then it goes to this next phase, which is that it goes to the governor's desk to sign. Otherwise, there's sort of a conference committee where members of the House and the Senate come together to try and you know, make changes that are going to be acceptable to both houses. This is interesting. So then once it's passed both houses, then it goes to the governor's desk, and the governor has kind of three options. The governor can sign it, and then it becomes law, or the governor can just not sign it, and after 10 days during the session or 30 days after the session, if the governor doesn't sign it, it just automatically becomes law. Or the governor can veto it, so they can take the action to say no, veto, and then it's going to go back. If it's vetoed, then it goes back to back to the House, and the Senate has to pass with I'm not exactly sure, like what does it say here? A 2/3 vote of all members in the House and the Senate. Then that overrides the veto. So that's the sausage factory, right? And what you're going to do, so that, right, that's like, if you haven't like fully digested all of that, if it's not making a lot of sense, we're going to watch this up close over the course of the semester. So what you're going to do is to find a bill that's being considered in the Colorado General Assembly this session. You're going to track the bill's progress. So you're going to watch it, right? Okay, great. It had its first reading on date. What committees was it in? Did it pass the committees or not? Did it go to the, right? How did it do on second and third reading? So we're really just going to have sort of that timeline of your bill and where it's going. Then, you know, here's the other piece of that is you're going to give written or oral testimony on a bill at some point during the semester. Now, this is a little tricky, and I will tell you that you are the guinea pigs for this assignment. So, you know, we're going to have some leeway and flexibility to figure out the best way to make this work. There are bills that have already passed. We are a week or two into the session already. And there are bills that have already passed. And so if you pick a bill that has a committee hearing tomorrow, I'm not expecting you to have testimony ready for that tomorrow. So you might have to switch track and, you know, pick another bill that's got a timeline that's a little bit further out. So we're going to figure out how to make this work so that you have an opportunity to attend, again, in person or virtually, a hearing and provide your testimony. I will talk also, I know that there are students who are co-enrolled in in both this class and the policy class, and in the communications class. And that class, I think, meets for the first time tomorrow. So I think as you're learning about that class, it has an assignment that is similar. So giving written oral testimony is also assignment for that class. And so what I've been working with Lee and Lily on is You know, for example, if you're developing your testimony for that class, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to do a whole lot of grading of, is your testimony good? Is it well constructed? That's a lot of what you're going to do in that class. Okay. And if you're not enrolled in that class, that's fine too. But that class is going to be a lot of instruction on how to write good testimony. What I care about here is that you understand this process and have the experience just diving in and going for it. And so there are a few options, and I will again go into a little bit more depth in the next week or so for those of you who are enrolled in both classes, to kind of spell out for you how to kind of navigate not doing the same work but doing complementary work for both classes. And speaking of complementary work, Carla, welcome. I am really excited to announce and share, hopefully many of you have gotten this information already, but Carla Nyquist and Maddie Goring, who are both alums of the MPH program and of this class by definition of being alums of the program, are spearheading this policy club idea. So Carla, do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. Most of it's on the flyer here. There was also an announcement sent out to everyone in the EOH department. So most of you probably received it, but yeah, we're having an interest meeting next week on Wednesday, immediately after Katie's class in the same room. No major commitments or anything, but mostly just trying to create a supportive space and community for people in the department, or even not in the department, but just interested in environmental and occupational policy, to, you know, have a space to engage with that more. So yeah, hope to see you there.
Awesome. Yeah, and so this will be a great way, again, if you're, you know, if this challenge that I put to you to, you know, give testimony really feels like daunting. They will, this is a great place to get some, you know, support structure and guidance around how to do that. I would encourage you, right, to do a buddy system. So find somebody else in the class. You can do, you can track the same bill. I'm not going to require you to track different ones. And then you can, you know, hold each other's hands, like literally, figuratively through that process. So speaking of tracking policies, I am very excited to have Ian Thomas Tafoya with us. And Ian, I don't know, I don't even know how to introduce you. Ian is a great friend of this class, of the program, and an amazing environmental justice advocate. He was the chair of the Environmental Justice Task Force that we mentioned earlier, has played a huge role in all kinds, has his fingerprints. Just yesterday we were chatting and I was like, oh, the Climate Protection Fund, this tax that Denver passed that creates $40 million to expend on an environmental, on like climate justice programs. Yeah, Ian did that. So I'm constantly learning about all the amazing things that you're involved in and have been involved in, and exciting to have you join us just for a few minutes today. I know that you're busy, to share just a little bit about what you're excited about. And we've just been talking about sort of the policy process and this assignment the students are going to have to track a bill and give testimony on a bill during the session. So if you want to share some of the things that, you know, some of the bills that you've been working on and that you are excited about during the session, that would be great. Anything else you think that our students should know at this stage of the game?
Yeah, great. And thanks for having me. Yeah, again, my name is Ian Thomas Safoy. I'm with Green Latinos. We're a national environmental justice and conservation organization, membership-based, people across sectors. People work in public health, people work for the government, people work for solar companies, people work for nonprofits. Some people are just impacted community members on the front lines who are trying to fight back. And that's actually how I ended up having a career in this. I actually worked for 3 branches of local government, the mayor, the city council, and the public defender. But I got really activated into environmental justice when they decided to widen a highway through my neighborhood. It was impacting my neighbors and my mother. And from there, I learned about so many other kinds of pollution and began traveling across the state, connecting with other environmental justice leaders, where I became the chair of the state's Environmental Justice Task Force. And that is one piece of legislation that is probably the most important to Green Latinos this year. It doesn't have a bill number yet. It is being carried by Commerce City Councilman Manny Rutinel, backed by the governor, and it is to invest in the recommendations that came out of that Environmental Justice Task Force. That's probably our biggest North Star. We also suspect that there may be a piece of legislation that is directly, and hold on one second, someone's about to come in the door and my dogs are about to go crazy. So see 1 second. All right, the dogs are calmed down now. We're good. Yeah, so we are also hopeful that there'll be legislation that will protect the Environmental Justice Act and related to some bad outcomes that have taken place at the Air Quality Control Commission, one of which we are in active litigation with the state of Colorado over, related to the disproportionately impacted communities, a defined definition of impacted class of people across the state of Colorado to toxics, income inequality, linguistic isolation, and racial discrimination, right? They all kind of come together for this definition, and you can actually look up that policy. Every year for the last few years, Green Latinos has launched something we call the Take on Toxics Tour, where we try to put together a batch of bills that we think are important, whether yes or no, that we can drive participation in. I think one of the most important things you need to understand is they will make bad decisions if they don't have people in the seats looking them in the eyes and making them look you in the eyes, right? You have to make that eye contact with them, make them feel it. I think that we would love to come back and talk about it. The bills include things around biodiversity, clean energy, removing pesticide toxics from communities. Oh, sorry, somebody's unmuted there.
Oh God, that's so funny. I was so mad at you right now.
I'll work on that.
I might pause here.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. But now you're muted, sorry.
All right, we would love to come back and present that entire slate. We've been able to do that in the past, where you can get more in-depth understanding about the nuances of the different bills. I did want to just address some of the things that I heard there in the beginning, and I'm testifying now twice today. Once against a nuclear bill is clean energy, and I have a book here where I'm going to actually reference it. I will say that I am maybe not the best example for first timers, but I did start as a first timer somewhere where I got put on a microphone and I got practice. I personally feel, especially working with elected officials, that if you agonize for hours upon hours to write a perfect testimony, and then you show up there and there's 500 people there to speak, and they cut it from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, you're going to have a little bit of a hard time with that. But you just got to go with it. You got to practice. I, unfortunately, and to the detriment of my communications team, don't usually pre-write my statements, which when you're working on a team, they would prefer, because then they can actually just take your sentences, put it on a graphic, put it on Twitter, instead of me having to like find the audio and send it to them, or ask for them to watch me live, which you never know exactly when that's going to be. So, I want to just say, like, when you're working on a team, you got to find what works best for the other people, but also when you're the voice or the spokesperson for your company, you also have to like understand, or your government, right? You have to understand like what that means. I heard Katie say earlier about like how to write good testimony or bad testimony. I mean, if you're there to say yes, and then everything else is extra. If you're there to say no, and everything else is extra. And again, don't agonize about it. And when I say I have to testify 2 times today, this isn't just taking place at the same time of the state capitol. It's also federal. I get an action alert this morning from my partners that the Environmental Protection Agency is having a rulemaking conversation around Title V permits of the Clean Air Act, which I have literally been involved with for years and sued the government over, regarding Suncor Refinery. And so I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna scramble and try to read as much as I can and trust that my partners are providing me with good talking points, and I'm gonna get up there. And I think that's what it takes, and I think the biggest lesson that I can take is like, you just need time on the clock. It'll get easier. You'll get more comfortable. Dress to impress. I think that's important, but it's not a requirement. And just be patient, because you never know especially one nuance that you need to learn about the process is there are some committees that are called upon adjournment, which means that they take care of their business first thing in the morning at the Capitol, and then when they're adjourned, they go to their committees. When we get deeper into the session, or when there's like things that they're really fighting about on the floor, that can move your meeting from 11 in the morning to 11 at night. And you may also be asked at the very last minute just to submit your testimony in writing. Not great for me because I don't write my stuff, right? But because, you know, we're on a shot clock at the end of the session. You can only read so many bills. There's only so many hours in the day. And if you want to get them across the line, and what your partners will say is like, we're pulling everybody's testimony, but these 5 people. And don't be upset if you're not part of those 5 people. You just do your part. It's a team sport. This is a team sport at the end of the day. And I think that that's probably the best advice that I could give you. I apologize that I can't stay here and talk with you more because I did get slapped in the face with I got to prepare for this EPA hearing now, in addition to this bad nuclear bill. And I just want to be clear, just your update on the bill, you can look on it online. This might be good practice for you guys today. Go look for the Senate Energy or Transportation and Energy Committee. There's only one bill. It's being carried by Senator Liston, and it's about defining clean energy or nuclear energy as clean energy. And this is all really related to wanting to open a nuclear plant by some in Pueblo, Colorado, in the middle of a disproportionately impacted community who successfully organized to close their power plant. But I found here in this book that was given to me, my soon-to-be brother-in-law is actually a nuclear engineer. He works for the Tennessee Valley Authority. And it says very, very clearly here, hold on one second. Unfortunately, nuclear power is not renewable, as it is a radioactive heavy metal, and therefore it is not very abundant, and over time it disappears. So when they come to us and they tell us that we want to reclassify it as clean energy and renewable energy so that they can use tax credits to bolster a program that costs 100 times more than a solar panel does, we have to call them on that. And that's why, again, it's a team expert where you have a team sport where you have different experts. So, Katie, maybe I have time to take one question, and then I gotta go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And we will have you back. You've shared a lot of great stuff. So one question for Ian. Be shy.
No, all right.
All right, we'll give you your time. Thanks. We will definitely have you back. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Go do your thing. Thanks.
Bye.
So this point about this being a team sport, I think is exactly right. And again, I think it's just figuring out how to be on that team. Also, the practice makes perfect, and the allowing yourself just to jump in and do it. And it may not be great. You may feel like, I totally, flubbed that. Know that your testimony is not going to make or break any of the bills that you're, so a little bit of humility, right? But when you, but being a part of that process, like Ian said, even just the value of being there, having, being a human that legislators have to look in the face. And then I guess the other thing I was going to say is exactly like Ian said, you can pick a bill that you very much hope doesn't pass, right? And provide testimony in opposition. So you can decide whether you want to kind of like love follow or hate follow a bill. And neither of those are acceptable. So what I just want to give you a quick glimpse of is, again, Ian had a great segue for us because I actually want us to take a look and just start getting familiar with this website. So there are a few things that we can do. Actually, where I'm going to start is Ian just gave us this challenge. Can we find the bill that he was talking about? So this is a bill on nuclear energy, right? So I can search here. In this section of the website. Let's see if my internet is working. I mean, it must be. I'm online here. Here we go. this looks like Senate Bill 23-076, sponsored by Harry Liston. And it is, oh, interesting. Introduce lost.
Looks like that's from 2023.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Thanks, Efren. So we need a 2024 version, and we can do, so we can get fancy here. Oh, look, here's the 2024 one. We can also go up here and say we want just bills from the 2024 regular session. I planned that so I could see if people were paying attention. Okay, so it looks like, and that's actually interesting to know too, that there was a similar bill that was introduced last year and didn't pass, and then it's back. That often is what happens. We'll talk about an oil and gas policy that that was passed in Colorado that made really big overhauls in the way that oil and gas is regulated in our state. That was SB 181 in 2019, and that, or 17 maybe, but it was introduced many times in many different forms before it ultimately passed. So this one, upcoming schedule, look, it's being heard in the Transportation and Energy upon adjournment, which is what Ian was talking about, which means that after, so in the morning, the House and the Senate meet, and that's where they have that first reading of bills, or second reading, third reading for bills that have made it that far. And then after the House and the Senate adjourn, then their committees meet after that. That is we successfully found a bill together. So that's one thing that you can use this website for. And then the other thing, so we'll just do this real quick, is that we can go actually watch what's going on. Typically so I'll show you a couple of different things. So it looks to me like past legislative sessions. There are no live meetings, so it looks like the House that these have already adjourned for the day. We can go here to so I think, and we can do that. We'll do this next week when we start meeting at 9. The House and Senate should be in session, so we can tune in then. But we can also go to this section, and then we can look at committees. And so, for example, that transportation, oh wait, no, we were in the Senate. Sorry, I know this is probably tiny on your screens. So the Transportation and Energy Committee here, it says that this session actually hasn't started yet today, but once it starts, we can actually listen in live to that testimony right here. Okay. So I want to give us a little break, and then we will come back to kind of go through the syllabus. But I encourage you during the break. So we'll take 15 minutes now. So we'll come back at 11:10. And here is the General Assembly website. I'm going to put it in here. So I'd like you to take a couple minutes during the break just to open up this website, start doing a little bit of Googling. You can put in, so again, there's different ways to search here. You can actually browse by subject or put your own keywords in like I did. But just start doing a little bit of searching. You don't have to commit to a bill today, but just starting to kind of figure out how you navigate this website, and we can start with any troubleshooting around that when we come back. So I'm going to put this in the chat. This is the website we've been looking at. If you haven't found it already. And I'll see you all back here at 11:10. All right, crew, we're on the home stretch. Almost done with day one. So if you found some bills of interest, why don't you go ahead and either put those, if you want to test out the Slack space, you can just list the titles and numbers of any bills that you found that are of interest on Slack, or in the chat is fine as well. I don't know if I've successfully added folks to the policy watch. Can I make everyone? I just tried to add Efren and he's already here. So let me know if you can't see. If you're on Slack and you can't see the policy watch channel, let me know. Again, also fine if you haven't joined the Slack world yet. We can get you there if you want to be there. Thanks, Thomas. All right, we've got some fire hardened building materials. Recycling. Oh, recycling of single-use electronic smoking devices. Interesting. That is definitely an e-waste stream, isn't it? Construction, professional insurance coverage, transparency. So, yeah, Efren, anything you want to share about that bill, the construction? What's on about?
It's apparently a study requiring the Division of Insurance to do a study of construction liability insurance for construction professionals. So it's looking to identify just like, I feel like a lot of policy insurance things, but it's also, that's at least from what I understand. I think that the summary is still, I need to get my eyes a little bit into it. It's not too straightforward, but it's like more of like a study. I just thought it was interesting. I wonder what, yeah, that's my interpretation of what I read so far.
Cool. All right, anyone else want to share? Emily, what did you find out about the electronic smoking devices bill?
Yeah, I definitely need to dive a little deeper as well, but it's pretty much just concerning like the creation of electronic smoking devices and strategies and like a potential advisory group, just to make like recommendations on how to properly recycle those single-use devices.
Cool. Thomas, very interested in this topic, as you'll see in a second. Some of the policy projects are gonna touch on fire resilience kinds of things. So what did you learn about the fire hardened building materials bill?
Just reading over it. It just talks about the bill allows a unit owners association or common interest community to develop reasonable standards for the installation, use, or maintenance of fire hardened building materials in residential properties. So it'll just be interesting. I've done a lot of work with homes that have those fire retardant measures in their home. A lot of the times they haven't been done correctly, can actually lead to other fires. So just curious about it.
Interesting, yeah. All right, let's pick one more. Aaron, you've got a couple there. You want to pick one of those to tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, sorry, I just realized my video wasn't on too. Yeah, so I think both of these sound interesting to me. The analysis of universal healthcare payment system is particularly interesting, and would actually be like very forward thinking if it were to go through, although I'm sure it'll have a lot of opposition. So it's looking at funding, essentially. It's a bill that would require Colorado School of Public Health to analyze a draft model legislation for implementation of a single payer, nonprofit, publicly financed and privately delivered universal health care payment system for the state. So essentially, instead of kind of pushing, I don't know how much you guys have heard about Medicare for all or other single payer kind of efforts. But instead of trying to push that through on a federal level, this would be sort of looking at a state version. I think there's a lot of pitfalls with kind of like a state universal healthcare system, as opposed to going through on the federal level, and how is that going to interact with our Medicare and Medicaid systems, is an interesting question too. But I think this is a really interesting piece of legislation, and I feel very passionate about expanding healthcare coverage for individuals. And so I think it'll be a good one to follow.
Awesome. Okay, I will take a little time after class to put some of these links. Again, also just encouraging folks, if you would like to put some of these in the Policy Watch channel, I've dropped some of those in there. You can keep an eye on each other's. So yeah, this is gonna be fun. We'll continue to take a look at these. But let's jump over now to kind of taking a look at the syllabus. So let me start by just putting a link in the chat. I think you should have, hopefully, again, everyone is on Canvas. The syllabus is linked on this page. There's a link at the top, so you can actually download and follow along. But I'm going to give you sort of the highlights here. As always, read the syllabus. It's good. Got lots of good information in there. So first and foremost, meeting format. So this is a hybrid class, meaning that we're going to have a mix of remote and in-person meetings. The syllabus is where you can find that full schedule. For the most part, we're going to alternate back and forth. After spring break, there's a little bit of variation in that. We have, as I've noted here, one week where we have an asynchronous class, so there's no full class meeting. Other than that, we are meeting, and other than that, and spring break, we are meeting on Wednesdays during this block. And very exciting, on March 13th, we're going to actually go see the magic happen in person. So we will have a trip to the Capitol. If you are not able to make that, please get in touch with me. We have some alternative assignments that are possible. If you are able to make it, it is a hugely valuable experience. Students, very routinely say that that's one of the favorite parts of the class, is going. Actually, again, getting to kind of we'll go sit up in the gallery and listen in on what's happening on the House floor. We can, check in on the House and the Senate. Usually, the committee hearings won't have started by the time our class wraps up, but we'll have the opportunity to meet a couple of legislators, hoping that Ian will be able to join us. I think he's planning to give us a little bit of a, tour, not just a tour of the building, but really trying to kind of explain where things are happening, right? And this will be, again, a good orientation of, we can go look at the rooms that you would sit in, that you will sit in when you do those, if you choose to do your oral testimony in person, for example. So definitely mark that date, and we'll share more information on specifics of that. And then also, again, for key dates, the 1st and the 8th are when we'll do our final presentations for your group projects, and so those are definitely dates to prioritize. I will have a remote option throughout the semester. I do have, again, at least one student who I believe is planning to be in the class and needs to be remote. I highly encourage you, again, if you are in the area and able and well and feeling healthy, join us in class. It's great to be, that we have the opportunity post-pandemic to sit and be in person together. So that is my strong encouragement for folks that are able. If you aren't able to be in class in person, again, please, get in touch with me prior to class just to let me know. That helps me kind of understand how to, set up my space and make sure that, I've got ways to engage folks who need to be online. This is the class in a nutshell from a grading perspective. So, you know, standard class participation. Again, I'm you know, incorporating ways. I will give you credit for participating in various different formats. So, you know, engaging on Slack, using the chat, speaking up in class. That's part of the participation. We also have some in-class exercises, including an exercise where we're going to look at some environmental justice mapping tools together. That will also fall into that class participation bucket. We have 2 of these eco-types assignments that I mentioned before. So your first assignment that's going to be due on February 7th is the first of those eco-types essays. Yeah, you have to kind of take this survey and then write about it. So instructions, I think, should all be posted and available for those assignments. We also then have 2 individual assignments that you'll complete on your own that are looking at some real world policy analysis problems. One of them is going to have you looking at a rulemaking around beryllium at the federal level. This is an occupational health policy example. You'll be looking at some of the public testimony that was provided and doing kind of an analysis of what you know, kinds of arguments different actors are making for and against these rule changes. And then you'll also have a policy related to climate change and carbon capture. Then the Policy Watch assignment we've discussed quite a bit. Again, I'll give you more details about the specifics of you know, what you need to do to get credit on that, but hopefully you've got a good overview of what's involved there. And then the group project. And so I've got multiple slides that will talk about that. So yeah, this is again just the overview of the ecotypes assignment. So there's a link. You'll go take the survey and then get your results. It's got sort of lots of different dimensions, so it'll give you kind of your overall ecotype and some information about what that means, and then these various different axes and themes. And so again, it's sort of a it's not quite a personality test. You're also going to take something that's also sort of like a personality test next week, a communication assessment. So doing a little self-reflection, and I think again, this is just a good opportunity to like take a look at where you are and whether that resonates, and then think about how that, you know, it's often easier for us to relate to people who are coming from that same perspective, but how can we critically examine our own values so we're able to engage more effectively with folks who may be coming from a different place. So this is one little dimension of that. All right, group project. This is the heart and soul of this class. And it is a semester-long project. I am going to get you into your groups by next week. So in class next week, you will be with your teams and you're going to get started. I want you to be able to get, hit the ground running before we're even in February, so that you've got a good solid February, March, April to work on this project. Because I think you're going to want to put some energy into it. I think you're going to be pretty excited about the topics you're going to get to work on. So this is the breakdown of, I'm going to go in a different direction actually. First, I want to talk to you about what those topics are, because this is the more exciting part, and then we can go to the nuts and bolts of what that timeline looks like. So without further ado, here are the seven different possible topics. I had, as of, again, yesterday, 20 students signed up on my roster. I have, I think, 16 of you in class right now. I know one student told me they weren't able to join today. My ideal team size is 3. So if there are, if we have a smaller number, then I will drop one of these, but I'll do that based on your interest, in addition to kind of my assessment of, my main focus this year is making sure that these projects are relatively well-defined from the start, and that you have a client who is going to have the capacity to engage and give you good guidance and feedback. So can't promise right now that these 7 projects will all move forward, but I will, by the end of the week, you will be getting a survey from me that will allow you to read in more depth the descriptions of these projects, rank your preferences for second, third on ones that you would want to work on, and then I'll use that in my sorting process. So let me tell you a little bit about each of these. So I have 2 projects with the city of Louisville. I live in Louisville, as I told you. Other fun fact that I didn't share is that my husband Caleb is on city council. And so I've got a really good glimpse into what's happening in my backyard. And I've had students working with the city of Louisville for several years. That work for me has become actually a bigger part of my own research since the Marshall Fire. So on December 30th of 2021, we experienced the biggest fire in Colorado history in my community. It hit the communities of Louisville, Superior, and unincorporated Boulder County. We lost 1,000 homes in a matter of hours, and that was 2 years ago. So those of you maybe unfamiliar with disaster recovery may think 2 years ago, that's ancient history, aren't we all done? About a third of people who lost homes in the fire in Louisville have rebuilt and are back in their homes. And a little over half, no, that's not true. About 2/3 are in the rebuilding process. So there's a third of people who still haven't started to rebuild their homes. We've got a lot of recovery in front of us. So one of the projects that I'm going to have you do is going to be working actually with me and the city of Louisville to be looking at some of the survey data that we've been collecting with residents of these communities. And so looking at our survey data and also working with the city to look at some of these questions, like Thomas, what you were looking at that state level, right? Louisville is trying to decide what requirements should be made for new construction, not folks who have rebuilt their homes. That's already, those folks are already kind of in the process. But going forward, what should Louisville's policies be around use of fire-resistant building materials, for example? In addition to a number of different decisions that are kind of in front of that community. So that's one project, the second one listed here. We're also working with the City of Louisville Sustainability Division. The city has committed to decarbonizing, so going to 100% clean energy in its sort of going forward. And so part of that is residential buildings, and part of that is commercial buildings. So this project will be working with the city on their commercial sector decarbonization plan, how to kind of move some of those projects forward. And so again, I think both of those are absolutely aligned with the city's work plan and decisions that are going to be coming before council the next year. So this is a great opportunity for you to provide a product that is actually then going to inform the path forward for the city. So as a resident of Louisville, in advance grateful for the work that you're going to do to help make good policy for the place that I live. And obviously there's a lot of lesson learning and sharing that goes on across communities. So even though Louisville is kind of a small place, the things that we learn and do there have implications for the other places around us. You met Ian today very briefly. If you are really excited to have more Ian in your life, and who wouldn't be, we've got a project with Green Latinos. As I mentioned earlier today, this is about, well, we're still within the state of Colorado, but within the state of Colorado, this is about as structural as you can get. So while it has the very boring title of the Administrative Procedures Act, This is a great opportunity, first of all, to work with an amazing client who has, again, is completely dedicated. He's a little bit, you know, all over the place, but these projects are always so impactful, and just all over the place, meaning that he's just very busy and engaged in a lot of things. But the time that you get with him is hugely valuable, and you will learn a ton and really get to look at. So the Administrative Procedures Act is sort of around who has power, like who's allowed to show up at meetings, and you know what deference is given to community, who has, you know, how is community input considered in decision-making processes. And so how can we move to a place where what community says has more power? Courtney, I'm kind of looking at you with the, you know, the Gem 2 experience that you had and the frustration that I think a lot of environmental advocates, folks who have been in this process, like you have 100 residents show up and say one thing, and then industry is saying, you know, no, this is bad for us. And, you know, pretty routinely the decision-making goes in industry's favor. And so I think this is really a question of how do we start shifting that from this really structural perspective. We have a project with Protégete, which is the Latino advocacy arm of Conservation Colorado. Beatriz Soto is the client, the main point of contact. Gosh, another just amazing human. She has been working with a legislator, Representative Velasco, who is very interested in introducing legislation likely next year related to protecting workers from extreme heat. This is building off of a Latino policy handbook that was created that highlights, you know, just how disproportionately overrepresented Latino workers are in several sectors that are likely to be highly affected by extreme heat exposure, whether that's agriculture, construction, various other sectors. And so trying to take a look at what's the current landscape, what policies do we have in place, how does this align with other efforts that are ongoing, and then where are the gaps. This is also going to be doing a comparison. So California has legislation on this topic, and so one of the questions is, should Colorado do what California has done? What are the similarities and differences between that environment and our environment, so that we can make, again, some good recommendations that will, you know, again, likely go into the policy that's going to be proposed next year. We're working with the city of Denver. Jorge Figueroa is the environmental justice director for the Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resilience Office. Also mentioned this earlier, the city of Denver has this climate protection fund, which was a voter passed tax that creates this $40 million fund that has a range of what are called allowable uses, things that the money can be spent on to related to climate action. And so they're within the group, this CASR sort of administers that fund. And in a recent conversation with Jorge, he had some questions about studies that he had read talking about the air pollution impacts of tire wear. Obviously, there's a lot of effort and focus on, you know, moving to electric vehicles, for example, which from a climate perspective, we're reducing greenhouse gases and we're eliminating emissions from exhaust, right, from fossil fuel combustion. So that's great, but that doesn't mean that they're completely pollution free. Not, you know, there's first of all, just the whole construction, right, the life cycle of electric vehicles, but even for communities living near highways, there are still, you know, dust and tire wear emissions. And so we've taken this little question that Jorge asked, and we've done some work within my lab to provide some preliminary answers. But what we think is really needed next to guide, you know, again, what CASR is going to be focusing on in terms of how it uses its funds are are there, you know, what is this sort of, what are the pros and cons of, you know, for example, a scenario where we just take all of the cars that are on the road and snap our fingers, turn them into electric vehicles, but, you know, still have this tire wear issue, versus, for example, investing more in public transit, that might, you know, reduce the number of cars on the road. So doing an analysis along those lines. CDPHE is public health and environment. So CDPHE, I think all of you know, with their environmental justice office, which, as I said, was created out of the EJ Act that Ian and I and many others were involved in getting passed several years ago. This is fun because last year I had a group of students actually work with Protehete on a bill related to water quality in mobile homes. That bill passed, and so now we're moving on to implementation. Surprise, when the bill gets passed, the story is not over, right? Now what we have to do is actually take what the bill says we're going to do and do it. And so CDPHE just hired a new person. This always makes me so excited too, when it's like, this policy passed, and now there is a human with a job who is paid to do the thing that we wanted to get done, right? So Maria is the client for this project. Her job is to do a lot of the implementation of this bill, which is around testing water quality in mobile home parks around Colorado. And so, and conducting developing and conducting a survey to help guide that process. And so that's what this team would be working on. This project, ideally, the clients would like to have students be able to do a little bit of travel to some of these mobile home parks to engage with the folks there and help develop this the survey. So that is a good thing to know. Again, that will be all of this information, more information than this will be provided for you to look at and digest. But if that is absolutely out of the question for you, then I would not prioritize this this project. I'll be trying to have at least a couple of members of this team be able to do a little bit of travel. And you'll be able to, with all of these, you'll be able to be doing some negotiating, right, and some discussion with your client to kind of scope it and figure out what exactly is feasible for you to achieve during the semester. So it's not, you know, there's sort of rough outlines for each of these, but you'll develop that plan more explicitly, including things like, you know, how much, you know, in person, how often are you going to meet in person, all those different things. Last but not least, this is the one that is actually still a little bit of a maybe. Just was a conversation I had over the past weekend, also coming out of some of the Marshall Fire stuff, but this is actually focused at the state level. So where this actually came from is, again, with my husband being on city council and being hit with this disaster and being completely clueless about what a local elected official is supposed to do when a major disaster hits, because it's, you know, he owns a property management business and has coached soccer and does a lot of great things. He's a very smart person, but he was never trained in what disaster recovery processes look like. And so he's had to do a lot of learning on the fly, and so have all of his colleagues. And so our question is, how can we help address that, right? How can we provide more training to local governments so they know ahead of a disaster what to expect? And so the state, this would be working with the state's climate preparedness and disaster recovery office, and likely with the Colorado Resiliency Office as well, to look at what resources already exist and how could we equitably, because some local governments are like a party of one, you know. So particularly for places with lower capacity, how can we try and better prepare those local elected officials and staff for what their role is and the kinds of things that they should be focusing on during a disaster. Any questions about these topics? I know, again, I've been throwing a lot at you. So anything you'd like clarified? I have been very successful over the past few years in giving everyone one of their top 3 choices. So it just sort of magically happens every year that, that folks have a good distribution of interests. Obviously, there's no guarantee of that, but that is that has been my experience, which has been great. And like I said, that it will depend a little bit on sort of when, as folks are figuring out schedules and get actually a solid head count, who's gonna how many people I'm gonna have, which of these are actually gonna move forward, but I'm hopeful we'll be able to have at least 6 projects. Alrighty. So and again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is all laid out and we'll be going over this. I'll go over this more next week, but just so you understand as well, the purpose of this, I guess one thing that I will use this opportunity to say, so there are multiple different milestones, right? So that you're not just like, write a report and at the last day of class you're like trying to throw something together. That's the goal of this, is to actually kind of walk you through this process and have some milestones along the way, opportunities for feedback from me and also from another group. So I'm going to pair you up if I have an even number, do something pair-ish if there's an odd number of teams, so that you'll be able to kind of learn about what another team is doing and have some dialogue and get feedback from folks along the semester. But there are these various different components. Again, I'll go through some of those in more depth. Next week, I'm going to give you time in class to start working on your group contract. I think the important thing to tell you about that is just that I think it's group work is a pain in the butt and wonderful and magical, and a core skill for public health professionals. I know that you've worked in teams before. I know that you will work in teams going forward. Mian already told us that, making policy is a team sport. Almost everything that you're going to be doing as public health professionals is a team sport. And so what I want to try to do is not just tell you to go work in teams and do it well, but to give you a little bit of scaffolding around how to do that well. So one of the things that you're going to need to do before next week is take this communication styles assessment. And then in your group time, as part of your group contract, you're going to kind of take a look at like, oh, I'm somebody who, really likes to cut the chit chat and just get right down to business. I've got a team member who really, is focused on relationship building and wants to make sure that before we dive in and start assigning tasks, that we understand, where folks are coming from. And if we don't know that about each other, then we can rub each other the wrong way, right? We can be like, this person is just completely unfocused, and and this person is completely insensitive and doesn't care about me. So knowing a little bit more about each other can help us work more effectively in teams, for example. So we'll have a little attention to that and that group contract assignment next week. Then again, you're going to kind of go through these different steps of meeting with your clients, scoping out the project, outlining what your deliverables are going to be. There is not one standard report template that I'm going to give you for this project, because I want you to have the flexibility for your client to say, what I really need is a tight 3-pager that tells me XYZ. Great. That's what I want you to give to work on. Somebody else might say, I actually want like a hefty report with all of the references and citations and everything, because I want to be able to like drop this on a legislator's office, desk and have them believe that this is a serious issue. So again, there's some flexibility, but I want you to be able to have the clarity. It's not going to come directly from me. So with your client, deciding at the beginning of the semester what you're going to be working on, so that you've got that clear plan. And And you can, again, there can be flexibility around that. If you, as you start going, it's like, actually, it would be great to, make this into a story map. Cool, right? That's fine. But it's just sort of outlining a path, and then, so you've got a sense of where you're going. You're going to do a literature review. You are going to have to do some interviews. And I'm going to, again, try to give a little bit more support to that effort. The key is going to be to start early in identifying folks that you want to talk with and reaching out to them. So, because everyone's busy and scheduling is tough. And so we're going to try and give you a good runway to ensure that you can do that. And I'm going to review your interview guides before you actually do the interview. So what I want you to do is, again, in that first meeting with your client, you're going to start thinking about who is it that we want to talk to. And you can even start doing some outreach to them to say, we want to schedule a meeting with you. But you will schedule that meeting for second half of March into April, so that you've got time to work with us in class on how to conduct a good interview and what questions you're going to be asking. I'm all about drafts, so you're going to turn something in, you're going to get some feedback on it, and then you're going to have a final, your final deliverables, and then your in-class presentations. These dates are not all right, as I'm realizing this. I think I'll update these slides. The correct dates should be in the syllabus. The final oral presentations, I believe, are the 1st and the 8th now. So sorry about that. Go with what's in the syllabus, and I will update these slides before I post them. Okay, I want to give you, because again, I'm all about there's all is not lost. There's lots that is hopeful. I'm going to give you a little success story. So in 2020, I had a team. Some of you may recognize some of the names. These are 3 MPH graduates who worked with the city of Louisville in their sustainability office. And they did a policy analysis of single-use bag policy options. Their policy analysis made it into the council packet. So it was considered and debated among city council. And city council decided, based on that analysis, to put it to the voters. And proposed to voters a 25-cent bag tax, which at the time was the highest bag tax that existed anywhere in Colorado. This is a sign that was in my yard that one of my neighbors made. So became this ballot campaign. It passed and went into effect in 2022. So we now have a bag tax. Now there's actually a state level policy, right? And it's not because Louisville did that, but Louisville got to be kind of out in front of that curve. So actually, no, it's a plastic bag ban at the state level now, but Louisville was out in front of this, and the students' work was directly a part of that. So that was great. This could be you too. So looking forward, next week we are in person in Ed2 North. I believe it's 2302. It's in the syllabus. So looking forward to seeing folks in person. I've got a fun game for us to play. There's also a recorded lecture for you to watch ahead of class. Gives you a little Econ 101. And so you'll watch that ahead of class, and then we'll have some Q&A in class and a fun in-class activity, as well as your time working with your groups. So again, make sure that you rank preferences, keep an eye out. I will put this on Canvas, but by the end of this week, by Friday, I will have that survey up for you where you can read in depth the descriptions of all of the policy of the projects that are going to be available. And you'll be able to rank your preferences based on those descriptions. And then also do your communication styles assessment, because we'll use those in your group contract exercise. So that is that. I like to end with some news from America's finest news source, The Onion. So oops, this up, share the link in the chat for your reading pleasure. So I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if folks have other questions or want to chat. Otherwise, have a great week and I will see you next Wednesday.